10 years ago, I lived next door to a man who beat his wife and filed a false police report against me. Everyone believed his lies, until the day I got my revenge and made sure the world knew who he truly was. About 10 years ago, I lived next to a man everyone called Mr. Polite, but I heard the screams through the thin apartment walls when he beat his wife. Her name was Angela, and she was always covering bruises with cheap makeup. The landlord pretended not to notice, and the neighborhood just turned the TV volume up. One rainy Thursday, the screams stopped, and I heard glass shattering, followed by silence so thick it felt like a funeral was crawling under my skin. I called the police. But when they arrived, Mr. Polite told them I was the one who broke his window and threatened him with a bat. His wife, terrified, nodded in agreement, eyes hollow. They believed him. I spent the night in jail, cold metal bench beneath me, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, wondering how the world could be so upside down. The charges didn't stick, but my reputation was gone. Neighbors who once waved now closed their doors faster when I walked by. That's when I decided that one day, I would get my revenge. I didn't have the money, the power, or the connections, but I had patience. I spent the next year rebuilding my life quietly, letting him think he had won. I'd see him in the parking lot, leaning against his truck with a beer in hand, smirking when he saw me. Sometimes Angela would glance at me from the passenger seat, her eyes begging me silently before she dropped her gaze to the floor. I started tracking his habits. He worked late Mondays and Wednesdays, came home drunk Fridays, and often left Angela alone on Sundays to watch football at a buddy's place. I learned where he worked, at a small plumbing business he co-owned with his cousin, and that he was skimming cash under the table, pocketing the difference. I kept a small notebook hidden under a loose floorboard, documenting everything. One night, I heard the screaming again, louder this time. I saw Angela run into the parking lot barefoot, blood on her lips. He caught up to her, dragging her back inside by the hair while she screamed, "Please, no." I called the police again. This time, they arrived too late. Angela showed up at my door the next morning, face swollen, whispering, "Please don't call again. He said he'd kill me if you did." She handed me a crumpled paper towel with a phone number scribbled on it. "If I disappear, call this." And she was gone. A month later, she was gone. Mr. Polite told everyone she ran away with a trucker. The landlord believed him. The police shrugged. I knew better. Her clothes were still in the apartment, her toothbrush still by the sink. But her phone was gone, and so was the car they shared. He told the police she stole it, but no one looked deeper. I called the number she gave me. A woman answered, her voice calm but tired. "She's my sister. Is she gone?" I told her everything. She said, "We'll get him." Her sister, named Melissa, came to town quietly, renting a motel room across the city. She showed me old photos of Angela as a smiling teenager, a girl with dreams of becoming a vet. Together, we dug deeper. We found out Mr. Polite had a hidden storage unit under a false name where he kept guns and stolen plumbing equipment. We found out he had unpaid taxes on thousands of unreported dollars. And then we found Angela's car, abandoned by a lake, fingerprints wiped clean. But he slipped. We found a single receipt from a gas station near the lake with his credit card, dated the same day she disappeared. Out of nowhere, Mr. Polite filed another report claiming I threatened him again, this time saying I followed him home and smashed his mailbox. It was a lie, but the police had to take it seriously. I spent another night in a cell, staring at a water stain shaped like a broken heart. The next morning, I was released. Charges dropped again. But it was enough to ruin my job prospects, get my hours cut, and make the landlord consider eviction. That's when Melissa and I decided enough was enough. We planned it carefully. Melissa gathered every bit of evidence of his shady plumbing business and unpaid taxes. I compiled the police reports, his violent history, and the receipts. Melissa contacted an investigative journalist she knew from college, a woman who owed her a favor. We told the journalist everything, but we needed one final piece, proof that Angela wasn't missing by choice. We broke into his storage unit one night. We found Angela's purse, hidden behind boxes, with her ID still inside. We called the police anonymously and led them there. The story broke on a Tuesday morning. Local man under investigation in wife's disappearance. Pictures of Angela smiling in a summer dress splashed across the news, next to mugshots of Mr. Polite as he was arrested on gun charges and suspicion of foul play. The IRS got involved. His plumbing business collapsed. His cousin disowned him. The landlord evicted him when the police ripped apart the apartment looking for more evidence. The neighbors who once shunned me now avoided eye contact with him, crossing the street when he walked by in handcuffs. They found Angela's remains near that lake, buried shallow under a tarp, where the wildlife had done the rest. The DNA confirmed it was her. He went to trial. I testified, so did Melissa, so did the journalist who pieced together his timeline. The DA dug into his past violence, the forged reports, the weapons, the financial fraud. The jury took less than 4 hours to convict him. Life without parole. As they led him away, he turned and tried to spit at me, screaming, "This is your fault." I just stood there, silent, watching him disappear down the hallway of the courthouse, the doors closing behind him forever. Melissa and I visited Angela's grave on a gray Sunday, leaving flowers and a small note that read, "You are seen. You are heard. Rest now." The neighborhood slowly forgot him, as weeds grew in the cracks of the parking lot where he once smirked with beer in hand. I got a new job, moved to a better place, and found peace in the small victories. Sometimes, I still hear echoes of Angela's screams in my dreams, but when I wake up, I remind myself. I did what I could, I got my revenge, but more importantly, I got her justice. 10 years later, I received a letter in the mail from Melissa. She had a baby girl, and she named her Angela. She wrote, "Because of you, she will grow up in a world where monsters don't always win." I folded the letter and placed it inside the notebook where I once kept all the evidence, then burned it in the fireplace, letting the ashes rise into the air. The courthouse hall was cold, the air tasting of old coffee and floor polish. I sat on a hard bench outside courtroom 2B, waiting to testify against the man who had tormented his wife, framed me, and stolen years from both our lives. Melissa sat beside me, Angela's sister, fingers twisting a silver ring that once belonged to Angela. She was pale but steady, eyes rimmed red but blazing with the promise that this would end here, today. The DA approached with a nod, files in hand. "It's time." We stood, walking into that room, the heavy wooden doors swallowing us into a silence that buzzed with whispers, the kind that only exists in places where lives are about to change. He sat there in his cheap suit, hands cuffed to the table, glaring at me like I was the reason for every bad decision he ever made. "Mr. Polite," the DA said, "do you know why you're here?" His lawyer nudged him, but he ignored her, eyes fixed on me, lips curling. "Because of him," he hissed, jerking his chin toward me. "Because he couldn't mind his own business." Melissa stood, voice shaking but clear, reading from Angela's old diary we had found hidden in a plastic bag beneath floorboards of her childhood room. "If anything happens to me, it's because he swore he'd kill me if I ever left. I'm so scared." The judge's face hardened. The jury leaned forward. Mr. Polite tried to laugh, but it came out like a cough, the sound of a man drowning in his own lies. The DA laid out everything. The stolen plumbing equipment traced back to his storage unit. Tax fraud records showing hidden cash withdrawals. The gas station receipt from the day Angela vanished. Her purse found in his storage unit, along with a piece of cloth containing her blood. Neighbors' testimonies of hearing screams, seeing bruises. And then came the final blow. A recovered voicemail from Angela to Melissa. "If I don't make it, please tell him thank you for trying to help me. Please tell him I'm sorry he's paying for my mistakes." It played in the courtroom, every word like a ghost's hand on our shoulders. The deliberation was short. When the jury returned, the room felt like it was holding its breath. "Guilty on all counts." Melissa sobbed, folding forward into her hands, the tension of a decade releasing like a snapped cable. I felt something inside me settle, like a storm finally leaving the sky. I closed my eyes, remembering Angela's eyes the day she handed me that number, the fear, the silent plea. They led him away, shouting curses, promising revenge, but the words felt empty. The neighborhood was never the same after that. The landlord replaced the windows Mr. Polite had shattered in his last drunken rage before the arrest. The neighbors who once crossed the street to avoid me now nodded respectfully, some even apologizing quietly, unable to meet my eyes. Melissa stayed in town long enough to pack Angela's things, each garment folded with care, as if she was helping her sister move one last time. We buried Angela in a small cemetery outside town, next to a row of pines that swayed in the summer breeze. Melissa placed a white rose on the grave, whispering, "You're safe now." I moved out of that apartment. It took months to clear the memories, to shake the nightmares of hearing Angela scream through thin walls, knowing I could do nothing then, but it was over now. I found a better job in a neighboring city, working in a warehouse where nobody knew my past, where the air was filled with the hum of forklifts instead of screams. I adopted a dog from the shelter, a nervous mutt that flinched at loud noises, just like me. But we healed together, day by day. One evening, Melissa called. She was holding Angela's old phone, which the police had returned after the case closed. "They found a video," she said, voice trembling. It was a shaky recording. Angela, sitting in the dark, whispering, "If you're watching this, I didn't make it. Please don't let him get away with it. I want to live, but if I can't, I want him to pay." Melissa and I watched it together on a cracked screen, sitting in silence as Angela's face flickered, tears sliding down her cheeks, her bravery shining through even in the end. "I promise," I whispered to the screen, even though the promise was already kept. 10 years passed. Mr. Polite, now a forgotten number in the prison system, filed appeals that were denied one after another. His health declined in prison, the only news of him coming from a guard's room or that he spent nights screaming Angela's name. Melissa got married and had a daughter she named Angela Rose, and every year on Angela's birthday, we met at her grave, placing fresh flowers, telling her stories about her niece. Sometimes at night, I walk the quiet streets of my new neighborhood, stars scattered across the sky like a promise, the air filled with the distant sound of laughter and life moving on. The fear, the anger, the helplessness that once ruled my nights have faded, replaced by a quiet sense of justice. I know I did the right thing. And sometimes, when the wind is just right, I swear I can hear Angela's voice in the breeze, not crying this time, but laughing, free. On the 10th anniversary of her death, Melissa and I placed a new headstone. Angela Marie Collins. 1986 to 2015. Loved. Remembered. Free. We stood there in silence, letting the wind carry our prayers, letting the past rest. As we turned to leave, Melissa looked at me, tears in her eyes but smiling. "You saved her, you know. Maybe not in life, but in truth." And I realized that revenge, for me, was never about seeing him suffer. It was about making sure the world knew who Angela really was. It was about giving her the dignity and peace she was denied in life. It was about making sure the monster didn't win, because some stories deserve to end. And some echoes deserve to be silenced forever.